Okay, everybody ready? All systems go. All right, so welcome everyone. I'm Nathan Heyer. I'm this year's soon-to-be former president. And basically the purpose of this event is just to go over what we've been working on this year and kind of give a glimpse about what our future as a chapter is going to look like in response to the ongoing pandemic. So a few housekeeping items before we jump in. We're going to be recording this presentation, so if you have any concerns with that, just please let us know after the event. And then we'd like to ask you to mute your microphone, and for best viewing, we'd recommend speaker view. And then if you have any questions along the way, they will be either addressed at the end of the program, or we might elect to answer them on the spot. And any questions submitted in the RSVP form will be answered at the very end. And then despite the challenges associated with COVID-19, we are still very committed to our mission, and we'll be doing our best to continue to collaborate with our international communities and local partners to implement sustainable engineering projects. And next. In the face of the ongoing pandemic, we've transitioned completely to online meetings. So we've retained 75% of our members. So we've kept a lot of the momentum we had going into it. And we've established various travel contingency plans, which will be detailed on later in the presentation. We've also embraced EWB USA's COVID innovation challenges. So we've submitted 2 submissions for the first challenge, including soap alternatives, cleaning water, and solidifying education on the importance of safe hygiene practices. And we're going to be going on that later on too. And at this time, I would like to pass it off to Jacob, Danny, and Ben to talk about our Guatemala project.
Hi, so my name is Jacob. I am the outgoing project lead for our Guatemala program. And for those of you that don't know what that means, basically we like to have 2 project leads for each project lead or for each program at a time. And so that allows us to kind of negate the effects that would come from the high turnover rate that we have in as college students, as a student chapter. And so we always have 1 senior project lead that's been around for at least a year, and 1 junior project lead that's still learning the ropes. And so I am completing my 2nd year as project lead and handing off to Danny, who has been my co-lead for the past year, and Ben Kroll, who we have just chosen as our next project lead. And we're really excited for how well he is about to do for these next 2 years. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to those 2 to give the Guatemala portion of the presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Danny Alfonso, and I am the Guatemala Senior Project Lead. This past year, we partnered with a new community, Xirihuyu. Xirihuyu is in the same municipality as Comalapa, where we worked in the past 14 years. Xirihuyu is a small new community, and their biggest need is drinking water. They actually do own a spring, pictured on the left. Not the cascade. The springs are actually hidden, but they're there. But they lack the engineering knowledge to create a water distribution system. Since partnering with Shiri, we had been in regular communication with them in trying to prepare for what was going to be our initial assessment trip in May. Our GUAT project meetings consisted of researching and practicing methods for collecting topographic data, detailed site surveys, collecting water quality data, collecting flow rate, creating a demographic survey. And actually this year we wanted to try our hand at photogrammetry, using a drone to create a 3D map of the community, which would prove to be incredibly useful when designing pipelines down the line. The goal of our assessment trip in May, well, what was going to be our assessment trip in May, was to collect this data for design years to come. Also to create a relationship with the community members and understand their specific need. However, when COVID-19 hit, of course, we were unable to travel this coming May. Right away, we moved to make multiple contingency plans for all possible scenarios. Currently, the most likely scenario will be a remote assessment. We are working with the in-country office to prepare and execute this assessment. Our goal is to have the data by this fall so that our project team can hit the ground running with design. With this, we would be on track for May 2021 implementation. We would like to work under the Rotary Global Grant with the support of clubs both in Minneapolis and in Guatemala. Since this implementation trip would be our first time in community, we will have another team prepped and ready to go in August if we are unable to finish that May.
Hi everybody, my name is Ben Kroll and I'm going to talk a little bit about our local project. So in addition to our international work, our Guatemala team took on a local project this year with Lincoln International High School. This is something that we haven't done before, so it was really exciting to work with a local partner. So we partnered with this high school in order to design an aquaponics system, which you can see on the left here, which was oriented at increasing equity in STEM education for the students. A little background about LIHS. The students come from a very diverse set of backgrounds. The majority of them are actually first-generation immigrants or refugees. And LIHS does not receive the same proportion of funding as typical public schools. So a high percentage of their students are on free and reduced lunch. In 2018, the graduation rate was 34.4%, and there was an attendance rate of 67.6%. Our goal with the aquaponics system was to generate interest in STEM and to provide the students with an exciting opportunity to engage in the classroom. We've been working with teachers at LIHS along the way to develop an exciting curriculum relevant to the system. A little background about aquaponics if you're not familiar. Aquaponics systems are closed loop systems with grow beds, which you can see on the top here in green, and a tank for fish, which you can see there on the bottom in blue. The water from the fish tank is piped up into the plants to provide them with nutrients, and then through the plants, it's filtered down back into the fish tank to keep the water clean for the fish. Our specific prototype includes a 70-gallon fish tank, which houses 15 goldfish, and then there are 3 grow beds for plants. It's also fully automatic, so that's pretty cool. During the school year, our LIHS project meetings consisted of research, design, and prototyping the final system. You can see our prototype on the left there. In order to offset operating costs for electricity usage due to the lights and the automated nature of the system, our team partnered with a local nonprofit to perform an energy audit of the school with a variety of cost-cutting measures in the form of energy-efficient lights, scheduled heating and cooling, and more. LIHS can save $8,837 annually. In addition to annual savings, the school is eligible for a $5,000 one-time tax refund. Initially scheduled for module delivery on Earth Day, the remote learning measures resulting from COVID-19 for both our university students and their high school students has led to an implementation delay. We will continue our prototyping efforts over the summer, and we plan on delivering 3 aquaponics modules to LIHS in the fall. I'm going to pass it off to our Ethiopia project now.
Hi, my name is Colin, and I am the outgoing project lead. So like Jacob, I'm the outgoing project lead, so I will no longer be speaking to you all next year, but we, myself and Sneha, are very excited to welcome Nate Twardock as the next project lead, who will be replacing me and working with Sneha next year. So really excited for that transition. But in terms of our project and our progress this year, it's been a really good year for the Ethiopia project. We have over 30 committed members, which is a lot more than the last 2 years. And so it's been a good year from an engagement standpoint. Project-wide, our drip irrigation system team found a new local supplier in Addis Ababa, which is really exciting. And so they have been adapting their design to fit the local supplier and their equipment, and they're ready to implement that as soon as we're able to travel in the next year. The Pipe Ridge subgroup was a new subgroup this year aimed at increasing access to water for people who live outside of the monastery to get water from one side of a river valley to another. And their design is now mostly complete, but they do lack some important data. So we're looking to send a team of engineers that we know from Addis Ababa on a remote assessment trip this September. The Solar Cooker team Taking into account the lessons they learned last year with the concrete design that didn't quite work out, is designing a much lighter fiberglass version this year, and they hope to test that out this summer and fall in prototyping whenever we're able to gather in person again and be ready to implement whenever we're able to travel again. Now I'm going to hand it off to Nate, who's going to give some updates on where the project is going this fall.
Hello everyone, my name is Nate, and as Colin said, I am the junior project lead for Ethiopia. So as you all know, looking forward into the future is kind of something that's hard to do at this point in time. Our guess is about as good as anyone's for what the future is going to look like. So that's why I've created multiple contingency plans to prepare for whatever future we find ourselves in. So the best case scenario right now, plan A, is that we are able to implement over winter break. So that's December of 2020. And if we're still not able to travel at that time, then we would be implementing till next spring. We're also planning on this being the last implementation trip to Flaka Geragera. So we've begun the process of looking for a new community in Ethiopia, which we've already made some great progress on. So after this implementation trip, whenever it may be, the next trip will be an assessment trip. So if we're not able to implement over winter break, then that assessment trip would happen in the spring of 2021. And if we're not able to implement until that spring of 2021, then that assessment trip would happen the next year in the spring of 2022. Now I'm going to pass it off to Sneha to talk about our new local project.
Hi everyone, I'm Sneha. I'm the senior project lead for the Ethiopia project. So looking ahead, following the Guatemala project's success and their model with the Lincoln International High School project, we've also decided to undertake a local project in the metro area as we finish up in Flaka Geragera and as we plan our assessment trip for the new community. So we're looking at a project, again, as I said, in the metro area, and hopefully we'll have some community engagement components. We've almost completed the search process. We're going to wrap that up in the next few weeks, which is very exciting. And we've talked to some great organizations and are broadening UWB's reach within Minneapolis. And so we'll be completing the design work for this project this coming year in the fall 2020 to 2021. And then next spring, we'll hopefully be implementing the project and working on that. So now I'm going to pass it off to Satish and Ben from Finance.
Hi everyone, I'm Satish Appaluri. I'm the finance officer this year, and I'll be transitioning into vice president next year.
I'm Ben Ontel, our current fundraising officer. And tonight, in the interest of financial transparency, we just want to update you on where our organization is at financially and how COVID-19 is going to impact us going forward.
Normally, we'd be showing you all annual data in the snapshot. Typically, we fundraise projects the year before they happen. So for 2020 projects, our fundraising timeline would be January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. However, COVID-19 basically threw all of that out the window. Since our 2020 projects were potentially rescheduled to next year, we decided to also combine our fundraising years. As you can see on the screen, we had an amazing fundraising year in 2019, thanks to our donors. We raised enough to cover not only the rescheduled 2020 projects, but also we're on track towards the 2021 projects as well. So huge shout out to those of you listening tonight and anyone watching this in the future. The money raised goes to our projects, and we can also see the expense breakdown on the right. This includes both the rescheduled 2020 projects as well as the planned 2021 projects. These costs aren't set in stone, but they're our best estimate right now. Now I'd like to hand it over to Ben to talk about our long-term financial situation.
Yeah, thanks, Satish. In the longer term, we have to address the elephant in the room, or perhaps it might be more appropriate right now to say the elephant in the Zoom. And that is this massive global recession that is going on all around us. And obviously there's a lot of financial uncertainty associated with that. So I can't tell you any specifics. If I knew what the future would look like, I could be very rich. But I can tell you that our near future fundraising is going to depend a lot on the health of the economy going forward. And our admin officer team has done some exercises to evaluate our readiness for potential decreases in fundraising income in the future. And the good news is we began from a really fiscally stable position, thanks to both the really good fundraising year Satish just mentioned and a longer term investing strategy. So without going too deep into the weeds of finances, we hold roughly $250,000 in quasi-endowed invested funds through the university, which serve two purposes. In the good times, we can take advantage of compound interest to multiply donors' dollars, and then in the bad times, we can dip into these funds to cover our fundraising shortfalls, like what may possibly happen in the next year or two. So at this point, the good news is we have high confidence that finances are not going to be a critical barrier to returning to our pre-pandemic operations. Things may look a little different in the upcoming years, but EWB is still going to be here, and we are going to honor the commitments that we've made to our community partners and to our supporters. So now I'd like to pass it back to Nathan to wrap up the formal presentations for tonight. And while we're here, I'd just like to remind you that if there are any questions you have based on our presentation so far, please put them in the chat window so we can answer them in a few minutes here.
At this time, I would like to give a special thank you to our subgroup leads, mentors, faculty advisors, who include Gary Aldis, Matt, Paul, Shannon. Thank you for all your hard work this year. And I'd like to thank you guys, our donors. Special thanks to Boston Scientific, who was able to fully fund our Link International project this year. And at this time, I would like to introduce Uma with a few words about our longtime supporter, Ruth Jones.
Hi, everyone. My name is Uma, and I have been a Guatemala team member for the last few years since I was a freshman, and I just transitioned out of project coordinator and still a bit of historian. We at EWB have just recently received word that Ruth V. Jones has passed away, and we're really saddened to hear about that. Ruth was well known throughout our whole chapter, mostly because of her really warm and open and enthusiastic personality, and she supported us wholly, and since before I came around, and I'm pretty much the ghost of EWB at this point. She was always excited to meet new students and to get to know us throughout the year, and at all of our events, she never failed to come to an event. And she was a retired school teacher, so she had that bone to learn, and it never left her. So she was always excited to see us excited, and excited for our own personal and professional growth when we got to know these different parts of the world better. She had done that before when she was young, when she was our age. She did a lot of that, and she was excited to see the next generation doing it too. In August of 2018, Ruth had established a Ruth V. Jones endowment fund. So here in EWB, we will be always taken care of by Ruth. She's always, her generous contributions to our group are going to continue to benefit us indefinitely. It was wonderful to have Ruth around for us.
Thank you, Uma. At this time, I would like to introduce next year's admin. You'll be seeing a lot of these people in the future, and I have full confidence that they will take our chapter to new heights that we never thought were possible. So, yeah. And at this time, I would like to transition into questions. So all the questions we received in our RSVP form will be addressed here, as well as any ongoing questions that come up in the chat box. So I'd like to hand it off to Melody. Would you like to read off our first question?
Hi everybody, I'm Sadiqa. I'll be introducing some of those questions that you guys brought up from the RSVP forum. First one being, with what you currently know, how do you see the coronavirus impacting the long-term outlook of the program? Nathan, if you could answer that one.
Yeah, so I would say our two biggest challenges that we're facing going forward are, I guess one of them is not really a challenge, but more of a lesson we've learned about fiscal responsibility. And the last 2 years, we've really been conservative with our money and made sure not to overspend if we didn't have to. And this has really proven to be a a huge benefit when it comes to situations like this, where we have a lot of financial uncertainty. And going forward, we have realized that this is indeed a very good idea, and we should continue this practice. The biggest challenge I see us facing going forward is fall recruitment. I think that with everything online, it's going to be tough to market ourselves, and especially repeating the enormous class that we had this year. For those of you unaware, we had about 120 students coming to our meetings at the beginning of the year in total. In one case, we actually had too many students for one of the Brunix classrooms. If you guys ever been to Brunix? We managed to pack an entire large Brunix room. So yeah, but yeah, those are the two biggest challenges that we think we will be facing going forward.
Awesome, thank you, Nathan. So another one of these questions is in, again, relation to challenges. What was one of your biggest challenges when you were all working in country? Danny, Sneha, if you guys could take that.
Yeah, I can start. I can talk a little bit about our last travel to Guatemala. I think personally our biggest challenge in country was kind of a mind state that we were in. A lot of with just due to the sheer size of the project. So the project itself was like laying 3 miles of pipeline, installing 167 tap stands in just 2 weeks, and we had to redraw the whole map that we had originally planned for because the trenches were dug in different places, old pipelines were moved around. Most of the travel team had never traveled before, and so there was this big, massive learning curve, and there were doubts that we weren't going to finish. So we were overwhelmed by the project size, and there were many moving parts, but once we started to get into a rhythm, and once we started to learn kind of the ins and outs, and once everyone kind of adjusted to being in Guatemala, we got into a rhythm of laying and gluing pipe, mass building and distributing these tap stands and installing them, and actually we ended up being ahead of schedule, which was really good feeling. This was also in major part to, having the community members working with us side by side in any given day. So mentally it was tough, and physically also. We had long days and less than normal amounts of sleep, but as a team, we pushed ourselves and are proud to say that we were able to complete that system in that time. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit on the Ethiopia side of things. I think our biggest challenge probably in country was just how many unknowns there always are. With regards to weather, religious holidays, there were a lot of days where we weren't able to get work done that we thought we would. And so it was a lot of flexibility that was required on behalf of the team. And we did power through. We were able to get done what we wanted to get done, which was really good. But the weather, for example, like when it rains there, we couldn't get our materials because they're coming down in dump trucks down this huge hill that is all muddy. So we'd have to wait for our material, but we were able to do things and kind of reorganize, reschedule. And it's a lot about what like engineering is about, is solving problems on the spot, field engineering especially. So I think we were able to come out of it as better engineers with stronger skills, especially like critical thinking skills. But it was definitely hard toggling all of those different unknowns, and especially in the beginning having that much going on. But yeah, we learned well.
Awesome, thank you, you two. Okay, so in terms of like size of projects, another one of the questions was, what are the current needs of the group, excluding the money related items? And Jacob, if you could take that one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we have the interesting position of knowing what we want to do in the near future. We really want to explore some of these new technologies like GPS, GNSS, surveying, drone surveying, photogrammetry. And we were actually going to be using our May assessment trip to Guatemala to explore some of these alternatives to typical surveying. And so we were really excited to borrow some equipment, find out what we really needed out of that equipment, and then go ahead and purchase it ourselves. And now that we're not traveling in May, we're kind of at a standstill there. We also identified maybe needing some satellite internet for our Ethiopia project because it would help them be able to access their designs and everything while they are in country. Otherwise, they don't have any access to internet, and everything they have to bring is on paper. And so we were waiting to see what the next community there would be in order to see whether or not that satellite internet would be a worthwhile investment for their next community. And again, now that we're not traveling, we may not be able to identify that new community as soon as we would have liked. And so we're kind of at a standstill there as well. One thing that we do know we will need moving forward is technical and creative software. As many of you know, the licenses on those are really expensive, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for our chapter to invest in a lot of software and a lot of licenses for students that maybe might not end up coming through the meeting and stuff or 2 project meetings throughout the entire year. And so trying to find alternatives to that, whether that means finding licenses, for example, our professional chapter, they have contacts at a company called Westwood that's allowed us to borrow their drone deploy app or account for using our drone surveying and stuff like that. And so that's been super helpful. And just in general, if we can find alternative sources to those so that it's not a major investment for our chapter and we can continue to invest those funds into the community as they should be, that's definitely something we're interested in. Something that became a new need this year, we just identified it, is a lab space somewhere on campus for prototyping. We have had access to a classroom/lab space in civil engineering building for the past semester, which we were using to build and store our aquaponics prototype. And we will be losing access to that sometime over the summer for new faculty, but it really identified how valuable that was to our chapter, being able to have one space that we can use to not only store stuff, but also build anything we need to, and have consistent access to it so that students can use it to, like for our prototyping, put on our new automation materials or check in on the fish or however that, whatever we need out of that prototype. And so finding a new space that will work on a longer term basis somewhere on campus that's very accessible and open to some of the more niche activities that we want to do, like pouring concrete, is a high priority for our chapter and something that we're definitely going to continue pushing into next year.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. So on the topic of new ideas, we have a question about the aquaponics system. Specifically, why are you handing off 3 aquaponics modules instead of just 1? Danny, if you could take that.
Yeah, so the idea with the aquaponics module is to kind of give equity to STEM education and give hands-on learning, or give an opportunity for hands-on learning to the students who typically learn in a traditional classroom setting. We would like the aquaponics module to be manipulated, so like maybe different fish, different plants, different temperatures, to kind of mimic different ecosystems throughout the world and see how that changes things. However, you know, no good experiment is run without a control. So the idea of 3 modules is to have 1 module as control and 1 module with different variables changed, and then another module with another variable change, and then the students are able to kind of track track the changes and how that, oh sorry, I have pen all over my hand, kind of see what's how that affects the fish and the life. Also through automation, we're able to kind of track pH, water temperature. We're able to manipulate how much we want, how much light we want, how much light we don't want. So yeah, so that is why we're doing 3 modules instead of just 1.
Awesome. Thank you, Danny. So now on the topic of the different communities, we have a question about how the communities we've been working with have been affected by COVID-19. Ben and Nate, if you guys could take that.
Yeah, I can go first. So in Ethiopia, there's only been about 130 cases and only 3 deaths. However, with lack of testing, this is likely to be a lot higher. But from what we've heard from our in-country contacts, that our community, Flaka Garagara, is remote enough where it hasn't really been a problem so far. And we'll continue to get updates as the situation sort of progresses, because it's still sort of in the early stages there. This is also highlighted in one of our COVID-19 update videos, which can be found on the COVID-19 update section of our website as well. Ben, you have anything else to add?
Yeah, so for Guatemala, the situation's a little bit different. Our community isn't as remote. And as of recently, the number of confirmed cases in Guatemala was about 530. Of course, with limited testing, that's probably not an accurate number at this point. But with regard to our community specifically, the municipality, Comalapa, which is where our community is, doesn't have any confirmed cases at the moment. But because of our NGO contacts in country, there are municipalities surrounding ours that do have some confirmed cases. But last time we were talking with our contact, he said that they're safe at the moment, and the government has put into place a lot of restrictions on movement and a curfew too. So we're really hoping that it'll stay out of our community.
Awesome, thank you, you too. So now specifically about Ethiopia, we have a question asking, since Ethiopia has done a wide variety of projects in the past few years, which one of the many projects has been the biggest challenge and why? And additionally, what is the biggest lesson learned? Colin, if you could take that.
Yeah, thanks, Sadika. Instead of addressing one single project as the biggest challenge, I'd like to give a shout out to our group for all the engineering that they've been able to do over the last several years. I don't think one single project or the engineering behind it has been our biggest challenge. Rather, I'll refer back to what Sneha said earlier about some of the problems we've been having with logistics. And I think that's been our biggest challenge. She mentioned not being able to get materials for a while. The community has several religious holidays that we work around. And so those things present challenges in terms of how much we're able to actually get done while we're there. In addition, communication has also been harder this year. We haven't been able to talk with our NGO partners as much as we would like. And so I think those two things combined have been our biggest challenge throughout the course of this project. And so that leads me to what I think is my biggest lesson learned in this whole process is finding a really good NGO and defining the scope of a project. We do like our NGO, and we're close with a few of the members of the monastery, but having an NGO that communicates regularly and is on board and on the same page with us in terms of what the project should be and what they need and how we can address those needs is really important. And so as we go into a new phase of finding a new community in Ethiopia to partner with, we're putting a large effort into finding a really good NGO that will be able to work with us throughout the process and contribute to the success of the projects in the coming years.
Awesome, thank you, Colin. So on the topic of lessons, we have a question asking just what's the biggest lesson learned from this transition from in-person to online, I believe. Jacob, if you could take that.
Yeah, so one of the biggest lessons learned that we've discussed here is just how this whole situation has highlighted the need for our work. One of the first, signs are areas that the government recommended we change our lifestyles is washing hands when we first started learning about this COVID pandemic. And so just realizing that the communities that we're partnering with, they don't even have access to that basic need. And like that is the most basic of needs right now during this COVID situation. It hopefully, if the communities were able to have just that ability to wash hands, then maybe it could start helping to prevent the spread. And so trying to continue our work to bring those basic needs to these communities is definitely highlighted by this whole COVID situation. And then I think another lesson learned that I really pulled from this is just how strong our chapter is. Before the pandemic, just in the weeks before everything hit the fan, we were having discussions here in our house about how everything was going right. Nothing all year had gone wrong. Everything was swinging our way. We were getting the grants that we wanted to, and it felt like nothing could stop us. And then this happened, and I mean, I say this and I see a lot of smiling faces as if I'm joking, but I really do feel like we are continuing and with that momentum, and we're still very strong. As the situation was deteriorating really quickly during our spring break, we had like several calls with project leads. I know we had one, I think I was on a call with people from 3 different states, and Danny was across the world in Indonesia. So we were, on the phone for hours and hours trying to figure it out. And not only project leads, but all of our admin board, our whole leadership, we've been adapting to the situation. Our project members, as you saw earlier in the presentation, we've maintained 75% of people, which I was really concerned with going into online learning, is whether or not people would still continue coming to our project meetings. And so I do feel very strongly that our chapter is strong. Fiscally, I know Ben and Satish talked about how we're prepared for this, and we are. And so that is one of my biggest lessons learned from this whole thing, is our chapter is very strong, and we're ready to, get through this tough summer and maybe through a tough fall. And once we're ready to travel again, we will be able to continue helping these communities.
Thank you, Jacob. Okay, on the topic of successes and grants, we have a question asking about how will working under the Rotary Global Grant be different than what we've done in the past? Danny, if you could take that one.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. We haven't done anything with the Rotary Global Grant in the past. We've used just traditional fundraising, like grants and donations just to fund our projects. But the Rotary Global Grant is a great opportunity for EWB UMN. You don't know what Rotary is? It's a NGO, it's international. So there's local level, which is at city, then there's district, and then there's countrywide, and then there's international level. So the Rotary Global Grant will take whatever we fundraise locally through Rotary clubs, so like Minneapolis Rotary clubs or Burnsville, I think we have a good relationship with, and then the district level will double that, and then the international level will double that. So our initial donations on the ground floor will be quadrupled. So that is really cool. In terms of like how the grant works, and what requirements they ask us to follow, it's really similar to what we already do. So that's very easy for us. However, the one of the biggest differences is that they require that the project is finished within the 1 year, which is why in Shiri Huyu, we would like to have a second trip planned and ready to go if we don't finish in May. So unlike Parasha took 3 years to complete, that would have to be done in 1 year. Another thing that Rotary Global Grant focuses on is sustainability. And this is really cool. There are more efforts than what we already do, which is awesome, to make sure that these projects will be supported in the long run. Some of these efforts include actually getting the municipality involved in keeping track of these projects, the state that they're in, if they need repairs or anything. So so in terms of sustainability and then timeline, the Rotary Global Grant will change the way that we operate.
Awesome, thank you, Danny. All right. Our next question is, what guidelines does the chapter follow in terms of travel restrictions? Colin, if you could take that.
Yeah, so as an organization, we follow the guidance of several other organizations in terms of making the decision on whether or not to travel. So number one, we are a child organization of Engineers Without Borders USA, so we follow all of their guidance. Right now they have a travel ban out for all international projects until further notice, so we are respecting those guidelines. In addition, we are part of the University of Minnesota, and all university-related travel is suspended until further notice, so we are keeping track of that as well. We also look at ISOS and the U.S. Department of State for their guidance, and there's currently a level 4 advisory out for all travel outside of the U.S., which essentially means do not travel, and so we are heeding that advice. And lastly, we follow guidance of country governments, and in this case, the Guatemalan government has actually issued a rule that planes from the U.S. cannot enter Guatemala at this time. So we are keeping track of all of these things right now, and they will be guiding our decisions on whether or not we can travel this coming December or May, and we are keeping track of all of these, and they will guide our decisions moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin. All right, last question from those that you guys RSVP'd with. How has EWB been responding to COVID-19? Sneha, if you could finish up.
Yeah, so EWB, as I think most of you guys know, is a national organization. So they've been holding these town halls, and there was one a few weeks ago kind of directed towards their response to COVID-19. They talked a lot about their response in terms of engaging with volunteers, since there are so many volunteers, as well as engaging with the underserved communities that they're involved in. And so there's I think EWB is involved in like over 40 countries. And so obviously there's a real potential to tackle needs that are going on, especially in those underserved communities. So they've been kind of coming at it from a national standpoint. They've been putting out these COVID-19 challenges that Nathan touched on earlier. And so those have been just going out to their volunteers essentially as an opportunity to engage with EWB and provide any solutions that we are thinking of. So the first challenge, for example, was about alternatives to soap and clean water and hand washing techniques, and how to distribute that information in all of our partner communities. And so that was really exciting because we, as a student chapter, were able to come together from both sides of our project. So there were Ethiopia members and Guatemala members involved. And we were able to come together and kind of brainstorm ideas and different solutions towards those needs. And then we ended up submitting 2 ideas, and we plan on continuing to work on this throughout the summer because it's really exciting stuff and it's very important stuff. And also, I know Ben kind of touched on the needs in Guatemala right now, and so I did want to share a little bit about what EWB USA has been doing in Guatemala. They sent this out today, which is very conveniently timed, but they've been pulling together a bunch of PPE to distribute as rapid response in their communities throughout Guatemala, because they do have their in-country office located there. So things are happening, and we look to stay involved with EWB and work with them as much as we can throughout all of this, because obviously as a large international organization, they have the potential to help out a lot of communities in need. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Sneha. So that's it for all the questions that were sent in through RSVP. I'll hand it off to Melody now.
All right, hi everybody. I'm Melody. I was this past year's intern or vice president. And so thank you so much for everyone who sent in their questions. And if you have any questions that are pressing now, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll definitely get to them as we can. A couple that were sent in a little bit earlier. Ben, if you wanted to expand on LIHS and like the energy audit, how do the energy savings in the audit and the hydroponics how are the energy savings in the audit and the hydroponics projects related?
Yeah, for sure. So when we were designing our aquaponics system, we knew that it was going to rely on a lot of electricity because the lights that are used over the grow bed to help the plants grow require a lot of energy to operate. And then also the system is fully automated, so it requires electricity for just normal functioning as well. And our initial idea was to supply that energy with solar panels, but because of some issues with the lease agreement and the landlord of the place, of the building out of which LIHS operates, we were unable to do that. So our team came up with a different alternative, which was to help them find energy savings. And an energy audit is basically when you have a person come in and they look at things like the number of lights, the types of lights, and then the operating systems for like the heating and cooling in every room. And just they look for like ways to make energy use more efficient and to cut down on energy use. And then we ended up with a really great report that included all of those savings, which will basically just offset the cost of the electricity for the aquaponics system and even do more than that too. So it's kind of going above and beyond what the energy use would have been for the aquaponics system, which is really cool. And we found that $5,000 tax refund, which is, they were very happy about that.
Cool, awesome, thank you. Question from Laura. Sneha, can you describe the type of local project that the Ethiopia project is considering?
Yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi was bugging out a little bit for a second. But yeah, so we are currently looking into a lot of local organizations. There's been a big push with our subgroup that we formed for the local project this semester to kind of engage with the community more directly. And so we're looking into different projects that serve particular underserved communities throughout the metro area. So I think right now I can kind of speak on like the top two. We haven't yet filled out our decision matrix and narrowed down our decision, but there are some that I think have their prospects are very exciting. And so one of them is in the Frogtown area, and they have a network of community gardens. So we're looking at working with them to supply their needs throughout the year. So they're looking into maybe having a greenhouse built, potentially some solar energy projects, which is really exciting. And that's something that, at least on the Ethiopia side, would help us continuing our work from like the solar injera cooker and transition into solar energy and actually installing that. And we also installed a solar pump, so transitioning that would be really interesting, and ways to apply that international knowledge locally. Other projects include irrigation systems, so that's kind of modeled off our drip irrigation system, also in community gardens, and so increasing the yield of different crops and stuff needed, for example, in indigenous communities, and kind of tackling those needs. So yeah, our projects, we're still in the decision phase a little bit, so I don't want to finalize anything yet, but it's looking to be really exciting. We have some really exciting communities and organizations we've been talking to, and hopefully we'll stay in connection with for outreach opportunities throughout the year, and not just make this a one-time conversation, but hopefully prolong it a little bit. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I think we've really found that our local projects have really helped with our just like EWB in general, and gotten people like really engaged throughout this past year. So last call for any questions. Otherwise, I will pass it off to Nathan for some closing words.
All right, so thank you, Melody. Before I wrap it up here, at the very beginning of the year, one of our new initiatives as a chapter was the creation of a creative team. And basically the creative team's purpose was to create media. So for example, our Guatemala video here, I just put a link in the chat that is to our media gallery on our website. And that has all of our videos we've created in the last year, as well as a Ethiopia photo book, which will be for sale pretty soon. It is absolutely beautiful. By creating this creative team, we basically have created multimedia and merchandise, and basically all the things that engineers typically aren't good at. We've kind of amassed all of our members that's their specialty, and it really shows. So I'd like to invite you to come to the website and check out our media gallery and take a look at the photo book and videos. As far as the photo book goes, there's going to be more information coming out about that in the future, so check your email inboxes. But other than that, we'll also be sending out where we'll be posting this recording for this presentation. So keep an eye out for that in that email as well. Other than that, we're going to be sticking around for chit chat the next few minutes. So if you have any questions that come rolling in, feel free to ask them. But yeah, thank you for attending, and hopefully you guys will hear from us soon.